Okay, hi everyone. The end of the season, this is all about to come down, so I thought I would do a behind the scenes walkthrough video, mainly for my own benefit so I can remember everything for next year, but just in case it might help someone out to see how I have things set up. So we'll start first in the garage where I have the brains of the whole operation. This is my first year doing Christmas lights set to music, sequencing, and so this is all my first year attempt. Right here I've got my little brain board, I like to call it. It's got my radio transmitter. This is one of the cheap transmitters you can get off eBay. It costs about $6 or $7. It did pretty well. It only really reached out to the street, no more than one house away or so, but right in front of the house it sounded pretty good. I did put a piece of wire on to it for an antenna, and just because I had it, I added this half of an old TV antenna. I don't know if that really helped or hurt. I didn't have a lot of time to experiment with it to see what might make it work better or not. So next year maybe I'll spend a little more time trying to figure out a really good antenna that might maybe give me a little bit better sound, but overall it worked pretty well. So this is my computer that runs the show. This is my Raspberry Pi. It's an old model. I got it from one of the enthusiasts off of the forums that I follow. He was kind enough to send that along with something else that I bought from him. And it's an old Raspberry Pi. It runs Falcon Pi Player. It took a little while for me to figure out how it all worked. I did get this USB to RS-485 adapter from eBay. That was just a few dollars, and it only had 2 connection points, so at first it didn't seem right. I felt like I should have a third connection for ground, but as it turned out I really just needed these 2. And there's a wiring diagram that you can find on doityourselfchristmas.com in the wiki that shows how to use an old Ethernet cable and connect it up to that adapter. I just made a little short Ethernet cable that connects to my show then, right here. And also, I just put this all in a little board. This is an old Pi, like I said, so it doesn't have holes in the board that you can mount to, so I had to kind of use these little pieces of waterline tube. I mounted those and then just cut a little slit in them so that the board could have somewhere to mount into, and I did the same thing for the radio transmitter. Since this Pi doesn't have Wi-Fi, I needed a way to be able to access it from inside the house so that I could upload playlists and things like that without having to come out here and plug straight into it. So what I did was I just used the Ethernet connection and went around to an old router that I had. So I just ran this router by itself, and I would just change my internet connection, my Wi-Fi connection, usually on my phone, to this router, and then I could just get into the Falcon Pi Player software if I had to change a playlist or start and stop a show or something like that. But I did find that this worked very well. Kudos to the Falcon Pi Player, or as they like to call it now, just the Falcon Player. Kudos to those people for coming up with such a great way to run a show. Kept me from having to have my computer set up all the time, and it really just worked pretty well. So you can see I've got the Ethernet coming out. I've got the adapter coming out of the USB, convert to an Ethernet cable. That's using a Renard signal. I have a Renard system. I have 5 Renard units throughout my yard that I'll show you in a second, and so it just all has to come out there, and I just daisy chain them together. So I've got one output basically. So we come out of there. I've got the Ethernet cable with the RS-485 signal, Renard signal, coming up here to my first box. Got a couple boxes up here. I'll try to show you if I can get a good shot of these, what's going on here. So I bought a couple of boxes off of a guy online. These are some older Renard SS16s. They were not mounted in the box. They did come with the pigtails. or I'm sorry, this one was already mounted in the box, so this one was pretty ready to go. This one I actually did have to add the pigtails though. And then that daisy chains to my second box. This one just came, the board was already put together. This is an old SS8. I did have to add pigtails to it as well, but the person had already put a heat sink on it, which was pretty nice. And what I really liked was he used these connectors for the pigtails, if I can get up on here, that come off when you need to change the board out or do something with it. Let's see if you can see those real well. It really made putting the pigtails on much easier. I highly recommend using those connectors when you do that. Okay, so that comes out of there, and once again we're going to daisy chain. We've got a cable coming over to this side of the house, to the side of the porch, and right down here I've got my third box. This is basically the same thing. I bought two off of that person, so I've got another SS8 here, added the pigtails, and again put that in another CG 1500 box. From there we go up. I've got, you can see a couple of cables heading up there, one going up, one coming back down. That's to, if I can find a way around the bush here. That goes up to a box I have up on the porch, above the porch. And that's another SS16, like the first one that I showed you. And that mainly runs the roof line, the lights along the eave, and some of these windows and stuff as well. Okay, so we'll look at that later. That comes back down, and the cable runs out into the yard. And here's my final box. This was actually the first box that I bought, or the first controller, I should say, that I bought. This is really nice controller. This is one of those Renard TR24s, Renard Plus, kind of a variation of the original Renard. I mounted it in a CG 1500 sideways like that, so I could squeeze in, and I did have to squeeze in 24 pigtails. A little difficult getting them in there, but I did use some strain reliefs in case they get pulled on. I just used some zip strips to keep them from getting pulled down. So the boxes in the yard, really struggled with how I wanted to mount these. I ended up going with the method that I had seen a few people doing, talking about online. And basically on the back of a CG 1500 box, you can see it here, they've got a spot where you can run a clamp through. You just take a screwdriver and knock out a little hole on each side of it, run a clamp through it, and then you can clamp it to a piece of PVC. So I got this piece of pipe, and I just bought the right size to make sure that it would go right down over this, which is just an iron spike that I have sticking in the ground. Got it for a couple bucks from Lowe's. So you can find those both at Lowe's and Home Depot. Just pounded that into the ground, set this right over it. Just stays there just nice and neat. Covered it with a plastic bag, and that worked out pretty well. Did the same thing with that box over here. That's got the same post. And what I maybe forgot to show you was I struggled with the idea of how to mount these other boxes. I really didn't want to drill into my siding. And so what I ended up doing was I had a bunch of these little S-hooks, and I discovered that they would kind of squeeze around and fit onto the molding of the siding really well. And so I used that to put some of my cables up, and as well I put a couple up right above these boxes. And then on the back of the box I just used some wire through a couple of the standoffs, and we're able to just hang those, and it worked pretty well. They're not really that heavy, so a lot of the weight of these cords is up. Now a lot of the weight from these cords of course isn't, but I really didn't seem to think that that was much of an issue. So that's how I mounted those two and the one up on the roof line. Okay, so those are the controllers. Let's see what I got running off of them. So the TR24 here in the yard,
I was going to do a mega tree. I was going to do 12 of those channels to do a mega tree. I had planned to have it either on the side of the yard, or was really thinking about maybe even using this actual tree and running 12 strands down, or maybe doubling 12 strands. So there'd be 24 legs, but 12 channels. Ended up at the last minute just thinking I just didn't have time to do that. So maybe next year. What I did instead was I went and got a couple of these tomato cages, stacked them together, turned one a little bit offset so that it gave me some more of a cylindrical shape, so it didn't come out so square. And then I just doubled up green, red, and white strands, made a super strand, and just started at the bottom and zip stripped it and just started wrapping around it. Worked pretty well, came all the way up to the top, ended the strings there. And what I did for each of these cables, I've got 3 channels running out here, and then I just velcroed them so they stayed up off the ground, just to avoid some water problems. I also did another thing to make sure I would keep the ground separate from the unit. I took a piece of pipe insulation and wrapped it around the bottom rungs of my mini tree. So didn't have any GFCI breakers this year, except for one early on through a really heavy storm before I was even running the show. Just had it up static. So this one seemed to help. Got 4 of those. They just each take their 3 channels and run straight out to them. Took one channel out here to do my sign. This was a floodlight that I had on a sign that I've taken down since then. And when we come back here, then I've just got some other channels running over here to run a few of the other props that needed power. Got a couple of deer. These blow molds were a birthday present this year from my wife and son, so got that one. Got a couple over there. Nice addition. The candy canes are 13 candy canes, but they're in 3 groups. I've got 2 groups of 5 and 1 group of 3. I think next year I'd really like to have separate control over those, and maybe even take them to pixels at some point. Just replace them maybe with some candy canes, Coro candy canes or something. Speaking of, I really don't have any pixels in this show. It's a complete AC light show. I've got 72 channels. I probably used 68 of them this year. It just came out to where I had a couple extra here and there that I didn't need. So if you're looking at getting started and you just want to do an AC light show, this is, it can look pretty good. I'll post some videos of the show as well, and my videos didn't maybe come out as great as I wanted, but the show really looked good in person. So the other things I've got going, basically all of my roofline and columns, bushes, everything I did with 2 channels. So around the garage here, I've got a channel of white, clear bulbs, incandescent bulbs going from the bottom right over to the top to the bottom left. And I also have a strand of multicolor. I did the same thing along the eaves. I've got white icicles, 1 channel for that peak, and multicolor running along with them. Not icicles, but just a strand. Also that peak. Then the lower gutter here is 1 channel. I'm sorry, 2 channels. 1 channel of white icicle, 1 channel of multicolored, and the same thing for the upper gutter. And then the same thing for that peak over there, up and down from left to right. I've got icicles and multicolors, 2 separate channels. That was the hardest part of the show, getting it set up. We had to get a 32-foot ladder. It was a little sketchy being up there, getting those connected to the shingles. Hopefully it'll come down a little bit easier. I just used little plastic clips, so I'm pretty sure I can just kind of start pulling from one corner and get them to come off without having to go up all the way. But we'll see today. I was going to do my windows in frames. I had planned to do 2 color, a red frame and a green frame. Was considering at one point doing a white as well. Just didn't have the channels for it. But I discovered there's just not a good way to attach lights to my windows. And so I was looking into maybe building frames out of PVC which is something I want to do in the future anyway when I move on to pixels. But it just it was going to be too much, and so at the last minute I went up to Michael's and I bought 8 of these wreaths that I think they were about maybe $6-7 a piece, and just wrapped 2 strands of lights around them, a red strand and a green strand, and that seemed to look pretty good. So I had seen another person on Do It Yourself Christmas had done that and posted a video using wreaths on a bunch of his windows, and I liked it, so kind of stole that idea there. One of my last minute additions was this wreath. It's really just a metal frame, and I bought some cheap garland at the dollar store and wrapped it around it, and I did 4 sets of white lights on it because I had 4 extra channels up there, and so I did them in quarters. So it's from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock is one strand, tightly wrapped, and then from 3 to 6, 6 to 9, and 9 to 12. And I could make it run around in a circle or do some patterns, and so it was okay. I'll probably keep that for next year, unless I change it out with some pixels or something. Okay, that's pretty much the light show. You can see the columns here. The columns have a white strand interspersed with a multi-strand. It's one of the cooler aspects of the show. I really liked how it came out. So basically I just put the white strands on first, and I measured those. I think that's like 11 inches drop on each corner as it goes down, as it wraps around. And then when I went back with the multis, it was much easier because I just shot for right in the middle of those, and so that worked out pretty well too. I guess one prop that I left out was my Yoda. Got this a few years ago as a gift. Not really that into inflatables, but this one was kind of cool. He's a Yoda Santa Claus. A Merry Christmas, I wish you. And so he just stood right in front of that tree when he was blown up. And last thing, I guess I didn't mention these bushes. All my bushes, they're in pairs really. This end bush and this one are kind of together, and then these 2 are together. And they have a white strand running through them and then a multicolored strand running through them. Same thing with the trees up front. Each one has a white strand and a multi-strand. And then this set of bushes over here as well was an additional channel. A little talk about wiring. Of course, when you do an AC light show, you're going to need lots and lots of extension cords. I tried to think ahead a little bit and maybe come up with some situations where I didn't need as many as I might have. So for instance, right here, I've got these first 2 trees that are next to the controller don't require any extension cords because the pigtails are 6 foot long. So they go straight to those trees. The next set of trees, the ones on the outside, use those pigtails and then needed an additional 6 foot cord. I just got these at the dollar store, and that seemed to work pretty well. I think I ended up spending about $30 on dollar store extension cords that were 6 feet long. I used them here and there when I needed them. I had a few extension cords from last year with my static display I used. But one of my big finds this year was I had seen some videos about using old broken light strands for extension cords. So what I did was I put a call out to my neighborhood and asked people if you have some old Christmas lights that you're not using, that are broken for whatever reason, I'll take them off your hands. As long as if the lights weren't working, but as long as the strand was in good shape, it still passes electricity. So my plan was to actually take the lights off. There's several videos online that show you how you can unravel them and just end up with 2 cables that are without lights, maybe a light or 2 in the middle, that you can use for extension cords. And I was running short on time, as we all do, and so what I ended up doing was I just left the lights on them. So up here I didn't mind that so much because they're kind of hidden nicely, and so I just bundled them up here and there and hung them off the inside of the porch roof. Other places, maybe it didn't look so nice. Here's one, although it was pretty well hidden. Over here on the porch, there's just a big mess there. Back in the corner here as well. And so you can see I've got these running up to here. So during the show, you know, these were not lit. They were just passing electricity to get up to the actual prop. Okay, same thing with this one here. Then I've got a few running on the ground over here too. So you can see down here, same thing. I've just got little bundles. Those again were not lit. They just were to provide electricity to get up to the prop. Okay, well, I hope that maybe helps for people looking to set up their first show, especially if they're thinking of just going with incandescent bulbs, AC lighting the first year. It's not horribly too expensive. If you get on the forums early and you talk to people that have some boards for sale, you can pick up things like that TR24 there, you know, for $100. Maybe a couple of SS8s for $100. I got both of those SS16s for around that much. Some of them people threw in extra things. A couple of them came with the CG 1500 boxes. The other ones I had to buy a box for. But you know, if you get on early, you can really get some good deals. You just gotta get started early. As everyone says, don't wait till the end. I probably started in September or so this year and found it to be not quite enough time to get everything done the way I wanted. But I had spent almost a year on the forums just kind of lurking and learning, and so I felt that really prepared me, and I was able to throw it together pretty quick. So it's January now, and my mind is already looking forward to next year. So I've got some ideas, and I'm already starting to get some planning done. I'm going to try to do a better planning job this year and get stuff done ahead of time. Okay. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll leave some links also to some of the videos of the light show in action. Thanks, everybody.